New World Order. This is something that you've been working on, thinking about, talking about for many, many, many years. You did your college, like final college research on this notion of the New World Order. You've written a book about it. There was like another book I saw. Can you give us a little bit of summary on that work there? Because I want to lead this into the movie Singularity and just talk about how creepy that whole thing was. And did you really come back from the future to write this?
So the question is basically, how did New World Order come
Yeah,
about?
yeah. And what is the thesis and what's the argument that you make there?
Sure. So I was at college and I had to do a senior thesis for my degree. And I was really interested because I had learned that this character, William Mandel Elliott, was a professor at Harvard for like 40 years. And he was sort of the professor emeritus of politics, trained thousands of kids. And I had understood at that point, see, conspiracies and the worldview that's given to you in college, it's very much imparted through the lens of your professors, right? So it's not just like, oh, you go to a good college, you get a good education. Well, what does that mean? That means that you get trained by certain people. And those people are oftentimes in a certain ideological lineage themselves. So Eliot trained Kissinger. He taught Brzezinski. He trained Sam Huntington. I mean, these guys are like some of the major figures of American foreign policy, right? And I was really interested in that. So I'm like, let me find out who this guy Eliot is. And I started researching that Eliot was trained by the British roundtable groups, basically. And the British roundtable groups were a legacy of Cecil Rhodes, who was this great imperialist of Africa. He conquered, basically conquered South Africa and Rhodesia and created the gold mines that gave us, is it Anglo-American gold? But essentially, a lot of these major gold industries that are still around today, and also De Beers diamonds, came out of basically his mines. So, he's this towering figure of British colonialism. And his legacy was he wanted to reincorporate America into the British Empire. Now, for people that think that's wild, just think about this. That Steele dossier against Trump was a British intelligence operation run against Trump. The British have continuously had a much greater influence over American policy than most people have understood. They've called it the special relationship. When we went to war in the first Gulf War, and then Bush Sr. got knighted, and I think Powell and some of his other cohorts got knighted for their service, it was service to the crown, because Iraq was a British colony before. Okay? The British were the ones that carved Kuwait into existence. They drew the map of the Middle East. So the British Empire is still alive in the form of the Commonwealth, and they very much have a financial power in the world. The City of London is still the major financial center. People that know about the real nature of finance and money understand how much influence and power is centered in the City of London. And I didn't go into that specifically. I went more into the nature of Eliot as the mentor of Kissinger and this whole British paradigm that was being brought in. In fact, the First World War, I'll give it to you like this. The First World War was the most pointless war for the American people to have been engaged in. The First World War had nothing to do with America. They said it was because the Germans were sinking our ships. They had a boat, the Lusitania, that had weapons on it that we put civilians on, and we were sending the weapons to England, and the Germans sunk it. And then we said, oh my God, they killed our civilians. This was to prompt our involvement, because why would the Americans care about the British? The British were an empire. They had a quarter of the planet under their colonial rule. Why would they care about the British? Why are the Germans worse than the British? There was no reason except that we had financial stake. JP Morgan was originally a British bank. So it's like, we have to understand the British have a tremendous hold. That's why every president until Trump went and, bowed to the Queen. Prince Andrew and Epstein. I mean, it's like the relationship to the British, and the fact that we still celebrate them and still care about their weddings and their royalty, and the fact that we let one of their royals say that the free speech is a stupid idea. The fact that the Americans are allowing this to happen is just, we've gone a long way since the revolution. I think the founding fathers would be very disappointed in us. So I wanted to explore how the British have basically maintained their role in influencing American policy. And Kissinger even admitted it. He said, "Oh yeah, all my policy I run through the Foreign Office of the British Foreign Office. You know, I run through with them before I go to my own department." When he was head of state. So yeah, that's what this was about.
All these claims that Sean's making, they're all cited in the book. You guys should definitely get it. New World Order, Sean Stone. Huge amount of citations and references and footnotes out the yin yang. When you're making claims like this and you want to be taken seriously, and you grow up in a household where people take fact checking and information and research very seriously, you're going to put out a serious product. Now, what do you know about the Great Reset? Is this related in some way?
All I know about the Great Reset, and I haven't studied it enough, is that Klaus Schwab, who's sort of the head of Davos, World Economic Forum, and himself trained by Kissinger. So he's in that lineage of, you know, New World Order fanatics. And when they say New World Order, what that really refers to is global government, by the way. That's what the agenda was. The British Empire's agenda was first turned into a commonwealth to make it more benevolent, you know, on the surface. Oh, we're a commonwealth, we're not an empire anymore. And then basically bring America back into its sphere, and ultimately move towards world government, which is centralized finance, one world banking, currency, governmental structures, legal structures, that kind of thing. So we're moving in that direction, right? I mean, the whole thing about like Bitcoin literally could be that, you know, especially as the major, you know, banks and whatnot start to adopt Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin could be essentially that kind of world currency that they're aiming towards, and the increasingly controlled governmental systems. I mean, you think about how, you know, the influence of things like the World Health Organization and all these different treaties and alliances have grown over the years. I mean, Trump did his best in a way to pull us out of these kind of things, you know, the Paris Accords, that kind of thing, because it's like you don't want to be buried. You don't want to bury your nation in these international agreements and treaties, because essentially you're disempowering what the nation of America was built upon, which was the people. The further we get from government, the more powerless we become, right? The whole point of America was supposed to be all power not given to the federal government was reserved for the states and to the people. So everything about world government is to take power further away from the people, to take it further out of your reaches, to put it farther away from you where you can't influence it as much. And then you start to entangle your country into these alliances and agreements and accords. And next thing you know, you're sending money, you know, as Trump rightly pointed out, to all these different countries, you know, and to NATO and this and that and the other. And you're like, well, for what though? It's like, you know, for what benefit to the American people? So they buy their guns. So Turkey buys their guns from us instead of from Russia. It's just like you're basically fleecing the American taxpayer to essentially prop up a global structure that ultimately doesn't serve the American people, as we've seen more and more, because the corporations of the planet have grown richer and richer and richer over the last decades, to the place where the Swiss did a study and it was like 1,000 interlocking corporations and their boards had like half the world's wealth in their control. And then, you know, meanwhile, in America, the middle class, it's like most companies with, you know, 10 or less employees are employing most people in this country. We're supposed to be a middle class country, but they fleece them. And then Bezos and guys like this don't pay taxes. It's like, do we understand yet the corruption that's going on? You know, it's obvious to anyone with common sense. But then I just don't understand why people with common sense then turn around and go, well, you know, I'm voting for Biden. You know, it's like you're feeding that system. Yeah. Don't you understand who the politicians serve?
No, they don't. People don't understand. No, people don't understand.
It's basic. It's just like, it's like ABC. I don't know.